Recently, an aluminum plant in New York State caught fire, destroying a large section of the facility. That plant was a supplier to several automakers in the development of their vehicles. Events like that and others have an impact on the supply chain and force companies to have to make adjustments. Of course, the pandemic really challenged the supply chain and forced many entities around the supply chain to rethink how they would operate on a daily basis. As for where we are at the moment when we think about supply chain, pleasure to welcome in Gad Alon, who is a professor of operations, information, and decisions here at the Wharton School. Gad, great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, great to be here then.
What do you think is the general state of supply chain right now, and what did the pandemic teach companies about their supply chains?
It's a great question and two different questions in one question. I would say most supply chains are I wouldn't say deep trouble. That would be probably an exaggeration, but they're still they're suffering from some implication of what started even before the pandemic, which is more and more issues that are more and more frequent, from climate to geopolitical risks to demand fluctuations to suppliers having issues to now you add tariffs to that, and then so most firms are struggling to just get their supply chain to stabilize. But then you have continuously other issues that just happen, and that's of like the fire that you're describing is just an illustration of one more issue that one needs to prepare for.
Okay, so for the automakers that did get aluminum supply from that plant, how are they adjusting to not having that access that they've had and are used to having for such a long period of time?
Yeah, I think so. For many of them, I think that's going to take a very long recovery, and I think that's to some extent really the first question. So just to get the numbers right, so 40% of the aluminum to U.S. manufacturers come from that plant. So we might ask, why do we have such a concentration in one place? But then my understanding is only Q1 in 2026 they will be able to recover back to the full capacity. And even then it's questionable. So here multiple things need to happen. So the first thing is many of these manufacturers will have to think about what we like to call time to recovery. How long will it take until they can recover? And then you start rationing, you start saying, okay, which models are going to get the aluminum they need and which models not so much. But you remember during the COVID days, one of the things that we had shortage of were semiconductors, chips. And there what you saw is that most manufacturers prioritized more expensive models. So Audi prioritized Q7 and Toyota prioritized the Lexus and the like. And so that's potentially what we're going to see. We might see cascading effects of suppliers that are now going to get fewer orders, and now they're going to reduce their manufacturing only to get caught back again where the aluminum is going to be back at capacity. Firms are currently probably scrambling to find spot markets that, as we know, has implication on price as well. So which you'd expect is expensive models to become potentially more expensive, cheap models to either not exist or becoming expensive. It will take a while for this market to recover. Or what we're going to see is those who actually were impacted will have to shrink their margins, while those who were not impacted will be able to actually gain market share.
Let me go back to something you said at the beginning of that answer and about the fact that such a large percentage of the supply is in one location. So obviously that's something that needs to be looked at as well. When you think about, we're talking about a period of time of growth in this economy right now, that there needs to be a consideration of not only repairing the facility that was damaged by fire, but looking at another facility, the potential of a larger build out in this sector.
Right. So I think that goes back to what something you asked me in the beginning, which is what did we learn from the pandemic? And I'm sad to say nothing. But it's not that we didn't try to learn. There's just like inherent trade-off between resilience and cost efficiency. And one of the things that many CEOs came out of COVID is with the idea that we need to build a more resilient supply chain. But most of them do not understand or don't appreciate the fact that to build a more resilient supply chain, you need to increase costs. You need to have excess capacity. You need to have redundancy. You need to have many a small overlapping plants rather than one big one. The main reason that we have such a concentrated risk in one place is that firms optimize for economies of scale as a way to reduce cost. They try to optimize for quality and compliance, and it's very hard to qualify multiple suppliers. You try to be just in time, so you try to concentrate everything in one location. All of these are best practices if what you try to do is reduce cost. This is not what you try to do when you try to be more resilient. But as long as the customer still wants cost and unwilling to pay for resilience, that's what we're going to get.
How will artificial intelligence play a role in supply chains as we move forward?
Yeah, so it's a great question. As we know, AI is the solution for everything. Well, not so much. So AI cannot prevent the fire. I don't think so, at least, but it can prevent concentration. It can help. One of the things that is being always the big promise is this notion of digital twin. And digital twin is the idea that you can actually run continuously simulation in real time and understand the implication of everything you do. These are very, very hard to build and underutilized because most humans just do not understand the implication of what they see. But now we're going to see more and more AI agents run supply chains, and we're still a few years away from that, but there are already firms that are developing AI agents. Then these AI agents are actually capable of saying that. So we might see inventory that's more strategic and more in better places. It's trying to understand the implication of these long tail implications. So, we're not preparing for a fire, but we should prepare for the fact that 40% of our supply is going to come from one location, and maybe we may want to hedge that. Maybe so. I think AI is going to make us more predictive, so easier to predict things. It's going to be easier to try to orchestrate things, and potentially also do more preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance, and so and that potentially may prevent some of these long tail events. We cannot prevent tariffs, but we can prevent some of these things.
And I think the other side to this is that, so many of the stories around supply chain, obviously because of the pandemic and recovering from the pandemic, have been negative, and the excess cost and the negative impact that, we've seen because of supply chains. If you flip it the other way, thinking about how positive a strongly run, efficiently run supply chain, what that can mean to not only economies, but to cultures around the globe.
Yeah, so it's a great question. To some extent, I mean, I think it's a there are two sides again to that story. One is that, of course, we read only negative things because it's a little bit like, you don't read about a great defense. You read about great defense only when there are many goals scored on them. That's the story of supply chain. But you're right. I mean, I think cultures that managed to actually build a robust supply chain meant that they actually, I mean, let me just tell a very, very simple, very simple story, which is, you can go back to World War II, and you realize that the countries that had better industrial base with better supply chain, those are the ones that managed to ultimately win the war. It was not just about being able to have the best army, but the best army that can actually replenish very, very quickly its supply. And so I think we are many years away from that, and so we forgot many of these lessons, and I think we are trying to relearn some of that now. COVID was a rude awakening for many, but apparently not for everybody. And then definitely that's at least where we see at the federal level some awareness now for that topic. But again, it's exactly as you say. It's usually through negative stories, not through positive stories.
So then how should companies think about supply chains right now, having gone through everything that they've gone through in the last few years, but thinking about the next 15 to 20 years about being as effective as they possibly can, because it obviously is something that's going to impact their bottom line.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. The best example for that, and I think the firm that you'd expect everybody to try to copy is Amazon, right? And Amazon understands supply chain almost like better than anyone else. Amazon and Walmart, but Amazon specifically, Amazon has a good website, but it's not such a great website. But the main thing is that when you order from Amazon something today, you will get it today. And if you order it and you're willing to pay, you might get even within a few hours and within a few minutes. And Amazon is definitely a firm that, the amount of cash in their supply chain is then used to fund the rest of the business. And every Amazon customer is an Amazon customer, not because how well the website is run. That's great that they have everything, but they have everything and you'll get everything. And so you'd expect more firms to understand that you can actually be both resilient and agile and cheap at the same time if you just continuously think about how do you improve everything, how do you integrate everything, how do you make sure that there is constant loop and you continuously try to optimize for both proximity and cost. And it's possible, but it requires a constant effort to do that. And we just don't see firms most firms have the share of mind of leadership into doing that.
Gad, great to talk to you again. Thanks very much for your time and your insight today. All the best.
Always great to be here.
Thank you. Gad Alon, Professor of Operations, Information, and Decisions here at the Wharton School.